And with the first story that I have for you today, this is actually something that started this week off. So this was pretty much the story that actually launched this week in terms of the madness that would follow. Now, at first, when I have heard about this news, I didn't really think much of it. I looked at this, I was like, okay, and then I moved on with my day. But then, when I saw the reactions on social media, like what people are saying on Facebook and on Twitter and stuff like that, oh boy, this is much bigger than I thought. Like, this is the kind of news that I was not expecting it to blow up as big as it did. I did not expect that people would express such strong emotions regarding what has happened. And what I am talking about, of course, shall be regarding the whole controversy with Elmer Fudd's gun. Yes, in an interview with the New York Times, the executive producer of the new Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max, Peter Braungard, has openly expressed a rule with the new Looney Tunes cartoons that Elmer Fudd, and I believe Yosemite Sam as well, are no longer allowed to go and carry guns. And, However, he has stated that even though there would no longer be any guns, there is still a good amount of cartoon violence that will be featured on the new cartoons. To read you from my source here on Deadline, he would go and state that we're not doing guns, said Peter Braungard, executive producer of the series, in an interview with the New York Times, but we can do cartoony violence, TNT, the Acme stuff, and all that kind of fun gags. So, you might be wondering, okay, now that Elmer Fudd would no longer have his gun, does that mean he's no longer going to be a hunter? Well, not exactly. There will be cartoons where he'll still go after Bugs Bunny as a hunter, but instead of using a gun, they stated that they will switch that with a scythe. Which is kind of a hilarious image if you do think about it, because now we were gonna imagine Elmer Fudd just walking around, like just saying like, shh, be very, very quiet. I am the bringer of death. Ha! Oh my god. Honestly, I hope they really do play a lot with the scythe. Like, not only acknowledge it, but just Elmer Fudd embracing the scythe as a hunter. That would honestly be great. But anyways, going back to what I was talking about, of course, considering that they are still keeping the cartoony violence, that is a part of the main goal with the new Looney Tunes cartoons, is that they still want to go and stay true to the classic Looney Tunes of the past, like back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and so on. He would continue by stating that we're not doing, whoops, nope, wrong one. It's right here, actually, the one underneath. It says, I always thought, what if Warner Brothers had never stopped making Looney Tunes cartoons? As much as we possibly could, we treated the production in that way. And he still reflected upon modern sensibilities, in which it is said here, we're going through this wave of anti-bullying. Everyone needs to be friends. Everyone needs to get along. Looney Tunes is pretty much the antithesis of that. It's two characters in conflict, sometimes getting pretty violent. And he has stated before where there are some times where the violence can get a little extreme to the point that it is questionable if he would even go and release that on HBO Max, and maybe he would go and find another option to go and release it somewhere else if it gets a little too extreme. So that's a little bit of a hint of what could set the tone in the upcoming episodes of the new Looney Tunes cartoons. So with that said and done, that's pretty much the big thing that everybody's been emphasizing. In fact, when you would go and look up all the headlines about it, that's what they all go and state, that Elmer Fudd and possibly even Yosemite Sam no longer have their guns in the new Looney Tunes cartoons. And from there, like, as I stated before, the internet just pretty much exploded when they heard about that. Like, some were cool with it, and some were massively upset, and of course doing their usual rants about political correctness going too far and all that stuff. And I mean, there is a part of me that does see why there is a huge amount of frustration going on because of this news, mainly because of the iconography of Elmer Fudd. Because when you do think of Elmer Fudd, you think of him as a hunter. That's kind of the thing that he is most well known for. He is the gullible and sometimes dim-witted hunter, always trying to go after Bugs Bunny, but always fails to do so. That's kind of his main shtick. In fact, some of the most popular cartoons ever done by the Looney Tunes, and some of the most beloved cartoons of all time, do feature Elmer Fudd as a hunter. Case in point, you take a look at the Hunting Trilogy. And if you don't know what the Hunting Trilogy is, that is a set of 3 cartoons, all directed by Chuck Jones, in which they all share a very similar theme, or a very similar format, where Elmer Fudd is going out hunting, and you got Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck trying to outsmart each other to make Elmer Fudd shoot the other, which would always end up with Bugs Bunny outsmarting Elmer Fudd to shoot Daffy Duck. And of course, it's because of the Hunting Trilogy where you get the world-famous duck season, rabbit season joke. So it's the trilogy is some of the most iconic cartoons of all time, and some of the most iconic Looney Tunes cartoons that perfectly present and describe these individual characters. Like, it perfectly describes Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck after he would go loony, and Elmer Fudd. So that's the big thing, is that Elmer Fudd as, like, the gun-shooting hunter is very iconic. However, there is one big question now that Elmer Fudd has lost his gun, and that is regarding, what if you take away the gun from Elmer Fudd? What do you end up with? Well, the answer, if you know your Looney Tunes, is that you still get Elmer Fudd. The thing is that many people seem to have forgotten that there have been several instances where Elmer Fudd never had his gun at all. And I don't mean the modern stuff that we have nowadays. I mean the stuff from the golden age of cartoons as well. There have been a lot of cartoons where we would see Elmer Fudd without his gun. And I don't necessarily mean Elmer Fudd switching roles where, like, he is far from the hunter that we know him trying to chase Bugs Bunny. No. There are some episodes where Elmer Fudd would go and chase Bugs Bunny without his gun. It has happened. And Elmer Fudd is still Elmer Fudd. The gun doesn't make him a whole person. Like, the gun doesn't give him all of his personality. It doesn't describe everything about him. Like, he could still not have his gun, and you could still recognize Elmer Fudd being Elmer Fudd. And if you don't believe me, I know the perfect example that could pretty much prove that. And it is what many people consider to be the greatest cartoon of all time. And I'm talking, of course, of What's Opera Doc. Now, I'm sure if you are watching this, you are more than familiar with What's Opera Doc. You know very well the cartoon. You've probably have seen it before. I mean, if you are an animation fan, it's almost like mandatory to check this out because, like I said, many people have stated this to be the greatest, not one of, but the greatest cartoon of all time. And throughout this whole thing, never once did he actually have a gun. Now, of course, they switched the theme to make it more opera, but still, it's the same thing, where instead of a gun, now he actually has a spear and a magic helmet. And yet, you don't see these people all riled up and angry about this news, and like they never ranted about the old cartoons where Elmer Fudd didn't have a gun. In fact, I've seen several people say this. In fact, I think it was animation historian Jerry Beck who said it best, that if these people really are angry about Elmer Fudd no longer having his gun, then why are they not upset about cartoons like What's Opera Doc, where they didn't show him with his gun? And that really does emphasize the big thing about this whole controversy. It's not really about the cartoons, and it's not really about Elmer Fudd. The reason why you see so many people get so emotionally invested in this, and why they are taking it more personally than they probably should, is mainly because this touches the subject of gun rights. That's why this is a little bit more of a, what people would say on the internet, a more political subject matter. Because it is true that it has been more and more of a taboo subject. And there are people out there, like people who believe in gun rights, or people who are often referred to as Second Amendment people, who think that having a gun means everything, that having a gun is pretty much a part of their personality, it's a part of who they are. They think that owning a gun is like an essential in life, where you need food, water, shelter, and a gun, for some reason, in order to live. And on top of that, like, there are also a lot of people, especially in America, who believe that having a gun is considered patriotic, where they think that having a the rifle or the gun is as symbolic as the bald eagle or apple pie. Like, they think, like, to be a true American, you gotta have a gun and you gotta shoot down some deer and stuff like that. Like, hunting is often viewed as like an all-American sport, or as a patriotic sport and stuff like that. So you do have those people that are so personally attached to their guns. However, in this day and age, and as time has moved on recently, the gun, as I said before, has become more and more and more of a taboo subject, especially when mass shootings have unfortunately become a lot more common, where there have been times where it almost felt like on a regular weekly or even daily basis that you would hear in the news that there's some far-right Trump-supporting maniac that's going around in public areas shooting people, resulting in several deaths, which is very unfortunate. And it's not just in America where you see these far-right maniacs shooting people, but you would also have, like, other places around the world. In fact, a few weeks ago, or I think more than a month ago, there's a psychopath in Nova Scotia, I believe, either Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, but anyways, there's this one guy who ended up setting houses on fire, and as the people were leaving their homes, there would be this maniac that would go and shoot them as they're running out to save their lives. But no, they ended up getting shot, which is a very tragic and very unfortunate moment, like one of the darkest periods of 2020 in Canada so far. So may the victims of them rest in peace. But my point is that the gun has become more and more of a taboo subject, and because of these mass shootings becoming more common, there are, of course, a lot more people demanding for gun reform, that something needs to be done, including banning assault rifles or military-grade assault weapons to be owned by civilians, because let's be honest, there are some massive and large artillery that no common person should ever go and own, and especially like when it comes to these Second Amendment people, it's very hypocritical that they would own all these guns, yet they are too scared to go and serve to the army. Trust me, as many guns as they would love to own, a lot of these people are way too scared to die for their country. But the point that I am making is that it has become more of a taboo subject where people are demanding for gun reform, they are demanding for more gun control, especially in America, which leads to these Second Amendment people and these gun rights people to become a little bit more paranoid when it comes to having their guns, because they always have this fear that they would lose their guns, that there's going to be one day someone will come in and take their guns away and they'll feel completely defenseless. Like, their gun is kind of like their weapon of choice, and they view that as as their item in order to go and protect their family and to protect their country and all that kind of stuff. So they're always in that paranoia state, no matter what. Whenever they hear someone or something is losing their guns, or that there will be less guns present, it makes them worried and it makes them fear for their guns, that one day those guns will be lost. And that's why this controversy has gotten far bigger than, debatably, than it ever should be. And honestly, when you do think of those reasons, when you do think about the gun violence implementing onto the reasons why they had to remove them in the new Looney Tunes cartoons, then personally, I feel like, you know what? That honestly makes perfect sense. Then it's honestly perfectly understandable, because it would be extremely awkward if you would see in the news that there is another mass shooting going on in America, and then afterwards you would switch onto the Looney Tunes cartoons where there's a new episode where you see Elmer Fudd shooting Daffy Duck in the face. Now, I know that at this point there are some people that might question it, and they might have a bit of objections to this. Like, one of the most common ones that I have seen is regarding the violence aspect, that they felt like it is very hypocritical for the new Looney Tunes cartoons to get rid of Elmer Fudd and possibly Yosemite Sam's gun, yet they would go and keep all the other violence that are intact. That they would keep the violence like all the dynamites and the anvils and all the boulders and and all the punches and the hits and all that kind of stuff. They feel like it's very hypocritical to keep all those other cartoony violences, but not the gun. But again, it's not about the violence itself, it's about the gun violence. The thing is, the big difference with all the other forms of violence that you would find on the Looney Tunes is that you don't often see these forms of violence be an epidemic in America or in other places around the world. You don't see mass murders happen with the kind of Looney Tunes violence that you would see in the cartoons. I mean, let's be real. When was the last time that you have heard people throwing sticks of dynamite and blowing people up? When is it the last time that you've heard a maniac trying to drop anvils on people's heads? When is it the last time you heard someone trying to commit an act of terrorism by pushing a giant boulder off a cliff? That's my point. The thing is, these cartoony violence are not common in real life, but gun violence unfortunately is. And the thing with the Looney Tunes cartoons is that they are discouraging that kind of violence in real life, and that's why they are not showing it. It's not really the factor of like the violence in general. It's the factor of realism, because it really, like, the thing is, watching gun violence happen on TV, yeah, it could happen when you would go and see that be referenced or be imitated in real life. Now, I know, like, some people might object to me saying that, thinking, like, oh, this is the same argument as violent, like violence, like video games causing violence and stuff like that, but that's not really the case. It's about the gun violence itself. The gun is the problem. It's not the cartoons or anything like that. It's more to discourage actual gun violence. That's kind of like the big goal here. So, with that said, honestly, like, with this whole argument, there is something that I do need to go and immediately say with the people who do object and are upset about the news that Elmer Fudd has lost his gun in the new cartoons and stuff like that. And there is something important that I need to go and state in order to clear out, like, all the variety of opinions that are stated about this. One major thing that I would like to go and say is that if you are someone who has never seen a single episode of the new Looney Tunes cartoons, and yet you are still upset that Elmer Fudd has lost his gun, then obviously your opinion is immediately invalid. It does not exist. It doesn't matter what you say, because obviously you have not done the proper research in order to go and understand the whole situation. You're just coming in blind, and obviously you just want to be angry for the sake of being angry on the internet. So whatever you say, I don't care, because the thing is, if you haven't watched any of the new cartoons, then it really doesn't matter what you think. But also, at the same time, I would like to go and state that if you do watch the new episodes, if you have seen the new episodes of the Looney Tunes cartoons, and never once have you ever noticed that Elmer Fudd never had his gun before the news broke out, then honestly, you're immediately on the side that it's no big deal. Because, let's be honest, is it really that big of a deal that when you have never noticed it when you are watching the cartoons? Is it really that big of a deal? And honestly, like, with all this, like, with all the different reactions that have occurred, it really has highlighted, once again, a real problem with people complaining about political correctness. Now, this is something that, it's not the first time that it has happened before. Of course, I remember seeing this happen again with the whole Apu controversy, when Apu was threatened to be taken out from The Simpsons and all that kind of stuff. Because the big problem, the big problem in general, when people would go and complain about political correctness, especially regarding subject matters such as this, is that they would go and completely exaggerate the problem. Like, they always go and make it so much bigger as it is. Because the way that they are framing it, they think that this doesn't just apply to the new cartoons, but also somehow that it would apply to the old cartoons as well. That somehow this would mean that, oh, because Elmer Fudd no longer has his gun, they are no longer allowed to go and see the old cartoons. That somehow they'll no longer see any of the cartoons, and even the classic ones, that Elmer Fudd would have his gun, and people are wondering, oh, well, now how will they do the rabbit season, duck season joke, and all that kind of stuff, which could not be further from the truth. It's not like that, folks. It really is not like that. The thing is, with this controversy right here, this only applies to the new stuff. This only applies to the new Looney Tunes cartoons. In fact, on HBO Max, you can still go and see many of the classic cartoons where Elmer Fudd does have his gun, including Rabbit of Seville. I know that Rabbit of Seville is on HBO Max, so you can still go and check that out, and you'll see that Elmer Fudd will still have his gun. And the thing is, and you know what's the craziest thing about it, is that this has already happened. What many people don't seem to know is that Elmer Fudd never had his gun. Even Yosemite Sam, like both of those guys, never had their guns in the new Looney Tunes stuff for years. In fact, I've seen many people have stated that ever since the new the Looney Tunes show back in 2011, that Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam, they never really had their guns. And even with the Wabbit show, like, they never had, again, like, when Yosemite Sam would appear in them, he never really had his gun. Or, like, almost never. Like, maybe there was a moment or something like that, but, like, if he did, it was extremely, extremely rare. And yet, you never hear people complain about those. You never hear people complain that Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam never actually had their guns at all. And yet, the thing is that you want to know why this is controversial? You know what? You want to know why, like, a lot of people are talking about this? It's mainly because of the fact that Peter Braungart brought it up. It's simple as that. I can guarantee you for a fact that if Peter Braungart had never said anything about it, if he never said that Elmer Fudd and possibly Yosemite Sam would not have their guns in the new Looney Tunes cartoons, then no one would notice. No one would have said anything about it, and they would continue watching the Looney Tunes cartoons as they would go and move on. Because again, the grand majority that are complaining, the grand majority of people who are upset about Elmer Fudd not having his gun are people who have not seen the cartoons and mainly just want to go and add fuel to the fire of trying to demonize political correctness to make it much worse than it actually is. Now, I'm not saying that political correctness is all good, it's all perfect. It does have it does have its problems, of course, but people always seem to exaggerate how bad it is. They completely want to show it as like a real problem. Like, they want to show it as like something that's completely corrupting and destroying our society, when in reality, it's not really. And, yeah, that's honestly the big thing that I want to emphasize, is that overall, it's no big deal of the fact that Elmer Fudd didn't really have his gun. Just because Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam don't have their guns, that doesn't mean they lose all their personality. That doesn't mean they're no longer themselves. They could still be themselves with or without their guns. It's not the weapon that makes the character, it's the personality that makes the character. And if you think having a gun, like, if you think that it is essential for Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam to have a gun for them to be themselves, then you know nothing about the Looney Tunes and you know nothing about these characters. Again, the gun is nothing more but an object. It's the personalities that make them the characters that we all know and love for decades. And even if they would no longer have guns for generations to come, they will still be recognized as the same Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam as they were back in the classic cartoons. And there is one more thing that I would like to go and comment about this. There's just one more thing that I would like to say to go and cap off this little piece right here. And it's just the fact that, folks, you gotta keep in mind that at the end of the day, it's just a frickin' cartoon. Okay, there's no need to blow your lid over a certain character not having a specific weapon. Come on, that is just petty. In fact, this would be categorized as full-on first world problems. And especially the fact that we are in 2020, there are much worse things that are going on in the world that are actually costing human lives. Like right now, you know why there are protests going on all around the world. Mainly because the grand majority of people know for a fact that there is a systemic racism that is corrupting our society that might as well be interpreted as white supremacy, which would go and not only encourage white supremacy, but would also go and encourage police brutality, so that the police can go and even go as far as murder people of color like George Floyd and Breonna, what was her name? Breonna Davis, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I do apologize if I don't have her name right, but no, Breonna Taylor, sorry. And Breonna Taylor as well. So you got all that is happening, and even with the protests, the people, you still got the police still committing violence, and you got far right activists that are trying to go as far as troll the police to encourage the violence as well, and all that while they are trying to go and pin the blame on the mythical Antifa or the radical left and all that kind of stuff. And plus the fact that we are still in the middle of the pandemic. We are still in the middle of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. It has not gone away, and yet you still get ignorant white privileged people that are going as far as not only ignore it, but flat out be stubborn to refuse to follow of any of the health and safety guidelines, like just simply wearing a mask or social distancing. They would purposely try to break those rules because they just want to do what they want to do, and that would end up making things worse, which is why right now the United States is the epicenter of the world of the virus, because there are too many stupid far-right white people that refuse to listen. And that's the big thing that I'm trying to emphasize here. If Elmer Fudd, and the point is, if Elmer Fudd not having his gun, a fictional cartoon character, not having a specific weapon, a specific object like a gun, upsets you more than the systematic racism in our society, more so than the police brutality that is happening all around the world, and also, if it angers you more than the stubborn white privileged people that are not following COVID-19 rules that are making things worse for the pandemic, then honestly, it really shows that your white privileges or your first world privileges is making you mentally challenged. Seriously, you need to rethink about your life decisions and reorganize your frickin' priorities, man. It doesn't frickin' matter, especially if you haven't seen the cartoons. At the end of the day, if this really does upset you, then all you have to do is just watch the cartoons for yourself and see how things are. You can have whatever opinion you want about the Looney Tunes cartoons, but at the end of the day, just see for yourself if Elmer Fudd is still Elmer Fudd, even without a gun, man. At the end of the day, it's just a cartoon. It's not worth freaking out or blowing your top over, especially nowadays when there are more serious issues happening in the world. At least Elmer Fudd not having his gun, at least that's not killing lives, okay? This is not a decision that's killing lives, is what I'm trying to say here. Okay, woo! Now that's a pretty big piece. So with all that said and done, I would like to go into the chat wall, and I would like to ask you all regarding what do you think about Elmer Fudd not having his gun in the new Looney Tunes cartoons. Do you think that he should have his gun? Do you think it's that he's better off without it? Do you think it's a big deal? Do you think it's not? Let me know what you think. Okay, so, where is it? Okay, there we go. Let's see. It's like if Infinity War decided to change. There are no Russian mission from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, but replace the gun with cartoon hammers, or take out the grenades and replace them with soda bottles. And the no Russian mission do cause World War 3 and Modern Warfare 3. And I don't know what Infinity War we're gonna do to okay, honestly, I'm kind of at a loss. Like, you're just going all over the place with, like, Modern Warfare. I mean, I've only played, like, the first Modern Warfare, and that's it. Okay, like, you're kind of lost me with that whole thing of what you're trying to say. Okay, let's see. I see both sides of this controversy, but I'm willing to shrug it off, as this is yet another example of the internet creating the mountain out of a molehill. Have we entered Wonderland yet? A wonderland where the universe is ass backwards. Yeah, that's the big thing, is that, honestly, you really did hit the nail right in the head. Is that regardless of where you would stand on this position, at the end of the day, it shouldn't necessarily be that big of a deal, because at the end of the day, we are just talking about a freaking cartoon. So it doesn't, like, really, regardless if they decide to keep his gun or not, it shouldn't necessarily matter. It doesn't, like, no gun, like, honestly, the lack of guns doesn't mean that the Looney Tunes aren't going to be the same as they used to. Let's see now. I am not upset about the removal of Elmer's signature gun, given that he was a villain without even using one every now and then, even in the classic era. I'm still pretty upset with My Little Pony having villains like Discord or Starlight Glimmer committed cataclysmic crimes without being held accountable, though. Yeah, but that's My Little Pony's problem. Alright, let's see what else. With everything that's been going on with all these protests, it's understandable why Warner Brothers would make this decision to remove guns, not just from Looney Tunes, but the cartoons in general, so I think they made the right call in doing this. Okay, no. Okay, the thing is, yeah, it's a right call in order to do this, but the thing is that this decision over here has nothing to do with the recent protests. Okay, because there is a bit of like a misnomer, like some misinformation being spread that some people believe that this decision was done mainly because of the Black Lives Matter protests, which, if you really do believe that, then it really does mean that you know nothing about the animation process whatsoever. I mean, the animators at Warner Brothers Animation has been working on this for like years, and this is long before any of the protests have occurred, so it's not because of any recent events that's causing all this. Alright, so, let's see now. I get that the gun is a major factor in Elmer's character, but honestly, I could care less. I never care much for the Elmer Fudd shorts aside from, do I even need to say it? So, I'm not going to be crying myself to sleep about it. I will say, however, that it would be pretty clever if Elmer Fudd had a short where he questioned the existence about his gun. Yeah, you never know, maybe. I know that the Looney Tunes have done that before, like, not necessarily in cartoons, but I think in comics as well, like, to bring up that issue about guns and stuff like that, but I don't know, I guess it really is the Looney Tunes, it really is Warner Brothers' call if they even want to go and fully acknowledge about the guns in general, but, we'll see. Honestly, what I would love to see is Elmer Fudd just enjoying his scythe. Like, I don't know. I want to see Elmer Fudd preferring his scythe more so than the gun. Just having fun with his scythe and, like, pretending to be death and stuff like that. You know, that would actually be clever. That would actually be fun. Let's see. These people just want to shift their anger on something so pathetic as a cartoon. Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam has always been violent with or without guns. So what the hell are you all complaining about? This is for the best, since we live in a world seeing gun violence is the norm, and the last thing we need is more guns along with police brutality. We should be lucky that the new show is still using dynamite after 70 plus years. Well, yeah, exactly. It's no big deal, folks. Let's see. Did I read? I haven't read this one. Okay. Honestly, I could really care less, cause the only cartoon where I feel Elmer having a gun, ever mattered, were the ones where he plays off against Bugs and Daffy. That's it. So basically the Hunting trilogy. So this whole ordeal isn't the worst thing ever happened, just a minor change that can be easily dealt with. Oh my god, you really did hit the nail on the head. Let's see now, where else can we have? I wasn't too sure how to feel about this when I first heard about it, despite how much I don't like guns. But hearing your take on it helps me understand that this is no big deal. I don't have HBO Max myself, but if I ever get it, I'm sure I'd enjoy the new Elmer Fudd stuff if I saw it. And yeah, I think honestly that would go and conclude this thing. Like, you could disagree with me, you can agree with me, or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think the only way that you can truly solve this is by watching the new Looney Tunes cartoons yourself on HBO Max. And that way, you will truly see for yourself if Elmer Fudd is still Elmer Fudd, or if Yosemite Sam is Yosemite Sam without their guns, and if the cartoons do work even without the guns. So that's really the big thing. And I think, honestly, like, no matter which side you're in, that's what I encourage you all to do. Just go and watch Looney Tunes cartoons. Because otherwise, if you just want to go and complain about something without actually doing the proper research yourself to see if things can actually work without the gun, then honestly, you just have to shut up.